Welcome back to the show, everyone. Dana and I decided we're going to do a quickie. And then I started giggling and it was funny. And I was like, okay. With you, Dana? Yeah.
Oh, all kinds of stuff popped up in my head that
I know.
was key to when I did finally come out of the closet that involved quickies. But that's a story for another day.
That's a whole nother episode.
There we go. Let's talk about dyslexia. It's sort of funny that's a quickie because one of the tenets of dyslexia can be attention difficulties. Pete, what is the first thing you think of when you think dyslexia is sort of the common knowledge definition of it? And myself included, I was sort of didn't recognize this in myself until maybe 2 years ago, a year or two ago, because I always thought it was like transposing numbers, transposing letters or words. And, it happens once in a while, blah, blah, blah. And then I finally end up on the International Dyslexia Association site. I think I was doing research probably for a client who said they were dyslexic. And dyslexia is really, it's a umbrella term used now for a whole bevy of different kinds of learning disabilities or learning difficulties, or notice me avoiding disorder, but that's a word you'll see out there as well. And what it comes down to is these are process issues for information. So whether it's auditory, visual, otherwise sometimes even tactile learning can be hard for folks, which actually can be a version of dyslexia. This quick screener that I have, just to read a few of these to give you an idea of sort of things that it could be. I'm getting excited. So let me go back to the definition that dyslexia is a learning disability. So disability, right? That primarily affects a person's ability or has an effect in tasks of reading, writing, spelling, accurately, fluently. It can have issues with comprehension as well. I remember that really being an issue for me. I would read a paragraph in grade school and then the teacher would ask what it was about. And I was like, what do you mean, what was it about? I'd just say the whole thing again. What was about? La, 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 la. No, how are you comprehending this, right? And so that is dyslexia. So certainly if you're transposing numbers and letters and that's an issue, that's a processing issue. Something like, do you confuse visually similar words like cat and cot if you're reading those? And those are things you see, especially when people are first acquiring the ability to read, and maybe even through junior high tends to somewhat correct itself with practice. But for some adults, that's still a major issue, would be sort of the severity of that. Do you lose your place in lines when you're reading? I used to constantly go to the end of the line and then I'd not know where the next line was. That's a dyslexia thing. So I would try to do my finger, and then only the dumb kids read with their fingers. So I stopped doing that, right? There's all this social pressure. Do you confuse names for objects? This is one I don't have, like table for chair and et cetera, but that's a form of dyslexia. Do you have trouble telling left from right? My wife has some dyslexia. Directional is one of them. I can remember when we were in California many years ago for my board exam, and we were traveling from the hotel, and she was telling me to take the exit, and she says, take the exit here to the left. Take the exit, take the exit. I'm like, there's no exit to the left. And then she points to the right. Take the exit to the left. So she's pointing to the right, but she's saying left. And I said, oh, that left. And it's like, that's a form of dyslexia. In her brain, she was saying the right word. Now, once you point it out to her, oh yeah, that was right. But when it's just her brain going, those mix-ups is sort of the wiring gets crossed, right? Just seminal to dyslexia. Map reading. I'll always ask my clients, are you really good at reading maps, or do you have a really hard time with maps? And there's a divide, right? It's usually people can manage a map just fine. And then I have like students, I asked this class of them last quarter, and about half of them can read a map and half of them thank God for GPS. But then even then, they have to go outside with their phone and look and see which direction it's telling them to walk, and they have to follow that, right? That's a form of dyslexia, or one attribute of the kind of dyslexia people can have. Do you have a hard time when given several instructions at once? That's an autistic thing. We've seen that over and over,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do you have to reread paragraphs to understand them? Is another form of that. Do you find it difficult sometimes to find the right word to say, especially when you're younger and you haven't sort of mastered fluency? How often do you think of creative solutions to problems? And like an ADHD thinker will give you 20 things to that, and that can, and not having that focus can be a form of that. Do you find it easy to sound out words, especially when you were a kid, like elephant, especially the ones that didn't make sense, like the PH as a kid?
Yeah.
To me, it should have been an F. What the hell is this PH thing? What is this? And then when they say, like, sometimes it's silent, sometimes it isn't, I'm like, what that? No, you can't do it both ways. Pick one, right?
Yeah.
Um, did you learn multiplication tables easily? No, I still struggle with that. Thank God for calculators. Organizing papers, organizing thoughts. Again, think junior high and less, especially if you're undiagnosed dyslexia, you might see that there. How hard do you find it to read aloud, right? And that's just the basic screener for dyslexia. And so what I tend to see in my practice when I'm assessing people, if someone was in their elementary ed and they were tagged gifted or smart or put in, promoted a grade or whatever, typically they're not dyslexic. If someone is pretty smart, it's clear to me that they have meta thinking and everything else, but they didn't do well in school. Like I didn't do well till halfway through high school and can identify with almost every one of these things. That's the thing that made learning hard. It wasn't the autism per se, it was autism and dyslexia for me. I mean, I cried the first time I took this measure and I came out like, I can't remember, it was strongly, but it was like, yeah, hell yes, you're dyslexic. Yeah. And then I took it again, like, well, I think I was grading it because it has you rank them 0 to 4. I'm like, maybe I just sort of faked that these were a bigger problem than they were. So I took it as minimalist as I could, and I still came out wildly dyslexic. So it isn't just transposing numbers. It's a fundamental way of learning that there's issues there. So why is this important for you if you're an adult listening to this? Let's say you're in a learning environment, you're at work, right? Accommodations can be really specific for this sort of thing. So do you need to auditorily take something in and visually? I'll have students that while I'm lecturing wouldn't be able to take notes while they're listening. So I make sure that all of my classes have the whole lecture uploaded even before the class starts. So they have that so they can follow along, and then they're adding notes while they're listening. But those are folks that process. If they had a process to it at the same time, they wouldn't be able to do it, right? I'll use different modes of trying to get information in. I'll use handouts. I'll use the overheads or PowerPoint or whatever it is. I'm verbally explaining it. I'm asking other students in the classroom, do you have a different example than the one I gave? These are all ways to try to appeal to different learning styles and potentially learning disabilities that are in there, right? If someone has a hard time learning something auditorily and you sit them down and you don't give them anything in writing, it's just, you're not accommodating that disability. It's a learning disability, right? ADA covers learning disabilities. It's you have to, by law, you have to provide accommodations for that. So my guess is there's a lot more people out there that are dyslexic than they realize. And if you find this measure, I think I found on the International Dyslexia Association, you can easily take some of those screeners for yourself and explore it more for yourself. But it isn't just transposing words and letters and things like that, although that could be part of it.
Right. Dana, I have always seen and thought about dyslexia as a visual processing.
Auditory as well.
Yeah. It's a sensory processing. I don't want to say disorder.
Disability.
A disability.
It's a disability.
And so a lot of times when I have, when I was doing a lot of psychoeds, before I transitioned to transition assessments, I really would see, okay, you've got yes, you might transpose numbers and letters. Yes, you might have oh wow, you're fine. You're fine here, but not good with word problems. Oh, you don't
Yeah.
comprehend this. Okay, okay. Wait, you like all of these pieces. I would always send them for a developmental visual
Oh, that
exam
could be a part of it.
evaluation.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. That's good. That's best practice to make sure there isn't something going on with the actual vision.
Right.
Sure.
And that like
Yeah.
there are 13 processes of the visual system. Acuity
Yeah.
is one.
Yeah.
But the
We
other
have so
things,
many cranial nerves just dedicated to vision. It gives you an idea of how hardwired we are for vision.
I mean,
Yeah.
our visual system is part of the brain.
Yeah.
So, and
It's
there's a
got its own
crossover
lobe. Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
crosses like, so you see that a lot, like, and that's the thing as you're talking about like the crossover, the
Hmm.
neurological neuronal crossover
Right.
happens in the visual system.
Yeah. You go right to left. Half of your visual input goes to the left hemisphere, half goes to the right. And then it's the only sense that does split, but sends the same info to both sides. But your occipital lobes process it differently on the right and left side.
Yep.
And then almost immediately after the input gets there, all the other parts of your brain light up because they're making sense of what you're seeing and they're making meaning out of it and that kind of thing. Which is
Yeah.
why I mentioned a lot of those things when I was reading that list. You may look worse when you're younger before you've had a chance to sort of your brain kind of get used to those things and maybe even accommodate for them in some way. So yes,
Yeah.
vision is really important. Auditory, it's the reason, I don't, do they still do vision testing and auditory testing in school for kids?
But that's just acuity. That's just
Okay.
like input. So
Just
so
to
for
make sure
vision,
that
it's just
you're,
acuity, and then in
okay,
auditory, it literally is just input.
make sure the volume's getting, it's a really big screener, not a
Yeah. So
specific.
there's no processing. The
Gotcha.
way that the brain is interpreting the information is not assessed. Like you definitely have to go to
Gotcha.
auditory integration for that, and then
Yep.
you have to go to
Gotcha.
developmental visual. But I would
Gotcha.
say like something that I've seen a lot of is when I'm seeing some signs of dyslexia in testing, and then I do
Mhm.
refer to developmental visual exam.
Yeah.
What inevitably comes out is
Mm.
like 3 or 4 of the visual processing functions
Hmm.
are struggling.
Oh
And
yeah.
so the
Yeah.
brain, so right, so and that includes tracking, like when you were saying, like
Yeah. With the
I can track
line.
it for
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
includes periphery, it includes
Yeah.
using binocular vision, two at the
Which I
same
don't
time.
have. Yep. Yep.
Things like
Yep.
this that really impact it. So I've also
Yep.
found that for some people, getting vision therapy has actually
Yeah.
really helped just make
Yep.
their visual system more effective or
Yeah, so you're not
efficient.
suffering through it and figuring out a way to accommodate it on your own. You're actually getting help to acquire those skills, which is great. Yeah,
Right, at the
yeah,
neurological that doesn't work for
yeah,
everybody.
yeah,
Just like
yeah,
those treatments don't, interventions don't work for everybody. But
yeah.
I find this to be so interesting because, and I love that you went through the checklist because
Hmm.
I think dyslexia is oftentimes wrapped up into reversals of letter and number
Yes,
reversals.
or
So
directions, or yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I think I meet some of that criteria.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
basically have diagnosed multiple people in my life. As you went through the list, I was like, oh,
Yeah,
I think I've
yeah.
just yeah.
I'll have to
I'll
send
let you
this to
know
you. Yeah.
in my family. I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll let you know that I've
Yeah, it's funny
you
because
have some
yeah,
good markers.
my dad was an accountant, can do the math in his head like like he's seeing it. I think it was always such a struggle for me. I still remember my older sister sitting me down and teaching me the trick for the nines for the times tables.
Oh yeah.
Taking if it's 9 times 8, you take the number one below, you take the 8, one below that, and then add what it takes to get back to 9. So, which is funny because that's a more complex way of learning the nines. But that made sense to me. Now I have a trick for it, right? Versus just intuitively being able to learn the times tables from repeating them so many times, right?
Yeah.
And then as I've aged, some of those I can do in my head more. When I get to the sevens and eights and nines, I can't do them rotely. I still have to use those. Sevens and eights, I still have to do the math in my head. I can't do them. Just
Oh
spit
yeah.
them out.
I hear
Yeah,
you. I was
yeah,
not also nines
yeah.
always mess 7, 8s, nines always messed me up as
Seven, eight.
well.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I still give myself permission to make spelling errors now. Like I posted a video on TikTok this morning that was about the way autistics sometimes have an unusual way of walking. It's one
Mm.
of the things you can see, and I spelled it GATE. And
Oh,
so someone
gait.
says, "Don't you
G
mean
instead of
gait?
GAIT.
GAIT?" And I'm like, yes, I did. And that would have been mortifying for me before. Like, oh my God, I put this, professional video up on, and I'm like, it's fine. I've given up worrying about misspelling things. And I'm 60. It took that long, right? There was so much internalized shame about it.
You
Yeah.
can just send, I will say that's not where I'm dyslexic, but
Mhm.
but you can
Yeah.
always you can send your next book to me to edit, Dana.
You did edit my last one. I got caught more problems than the editor did. Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, for Bite Size Autism too. It was terrible. Yeah, yeah. I got my money back, by the way, which was great. But yeah,
Excellent. Good.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh, so okay. So for those of you, maybe Dana, do you want to let's put in the show notes. I want to make sure that, no, I really hope that our podcast really is a
Hmm.
place for people to find some comfort and to bring
Yeah,
awareness and acceptance, right to neurodiversity. So like that's
yeah,
one of my big hopes. But I like one of my hopes too is that every episode has a little bit of a takeaway for you.
yeah, yeah. And
and
try
so
go
yeah.
look on the International Dyslexia Association. It's the best site that I have found. It's user friendly. They even sell T-shirts. We always talk about it, but they're selling T-shirts. And I think it's a great way to spend some time on that site and see if it fits for you. And then if it does, talk to someone about getting assessed for it.
I'll put it in
Yeah.
the show notes. I'll
Oh,
I'll put
cool.
it in the
Okay.
description. And if you're
Great.
watching on YouTube, I'll put it in the description so that
Mhm.
you can click on it and see that and
Great.
go there. But
Cool.
all right, everyone, have a good one. Be good to you. Be good to others, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.